Folks, it's SC Closer here again. Friends call me Vic. I think this is the fourth Vic Sea Stories and Tall Tales. This is a pretty good one. I call this story, It Doesn't Look Live. I had a duty day, and I had two other electricians in the duty section with me. I wasn't senior at that point. I think I was still a third class. We had a second class, great guy, good friend of mine, and he passed a few years ago, and it's just hard to believe that he's gone, but he was a good guy. And then we had another fella, he was a fireman at the time, and you'll hear stories about him because he was the one, if you needed anything, he'd find it. But he was out doing some maintenance. He was in the ship's passageway, and he was doing some kind of maintenance on the breaker panels. I think he was checking the stuffing tubes or something like that. And the cables come through these panels, and there's like little nuts and washers that hold the little stuffing tubes, they call them, that hold the cables in place so that they don't pull in and out. It's kind of odd. They were coming in the top of this particular panel. Normally they come in the bottom so that water can't get inside, but being that this was up on the 01 level or something, I assumed that it didn't think the water was going to get that high. If it did, we were all in trouble. But besides that, he was up there doing something, and he came back into the shop, and he's like, I want y'all to come look at something. And I was like, okay. So we walk across the hangar bay, and we go into the captain's passageway. And we go up there on the 01 level, and we're looking at this breaker panel. And he's like, I want you to look at this. And there's 3 buses coming in that breaker panel. That's a 450 volt panel. And the buses, they're big brass pieces, they call them buses. They're big brass bars. And one of the nuts had fallen off of the stuffing tube and was sitting there on top of the breakers in between 2 of the buses. And it looked like it was touching both of them. And he was like, that ain't supposed to be there. And I was like, no, it's not. So we need to get that out of there. I said, did you kill the power to that, Gonzo? And he was looking at it, and he was like, I think he says, it don't look live. And I was like, yeah, but how can you tell? You got to turn the breaker off and check it. And the senior guy was there with me, and he was like, well, it looks like it's touching those 2 buses. It can't be on. Otherwise, it would have exploded. And I said, yeah. So the senior guy, he has a tool belt. He pulls out some needle nose pliers, and he had wrapped tape all around the handles of it so he wouldn't get shocked in case he was trying to get in and pull something out, something live. And he was like, hang on a minute. He says, I'll pull it out real carefully in case it's not touching. While we're doing this, I have no idea. So he reaches in there, and I'm behind him looking over his shoulder. And Gonzo's behind me looking over my shoulder, and we're watching. And he's reaching in there, and he has a bracelet on, and he's holding that bracelet like this, and he's reaching in like this, and he puts those needle nose on that little nut, and he goes to pull it out. Bam! Explosion. Big bright flash. Whole place is just full of smoke. The guy that did that, all the hair on his arm was singed. That brass, or that nut had melted. The 2 brass buses had, where that thing touched on either side, had melted. It wasn't touching. It was just that close that it looked like it had been, but it wasn't until he tried to move it. We all had like smut on us. And it was just like a huge catastrophe. And we all looked at each other. We're like, oh my God, that was live. We go back over into the shop. By that time, machinist or was a boiler tech, had run up to the shop, said, "Hey, y'all need to come down here, man." He said there was a big bang on the switchboard. We don't know what happened. He said the chief told him to come up here and grab an electrician, tell him to come down and look at the switchboard. We knew what it was. That thing tripped a breaker on the switchboard. Anyway, the senior guy, he looked at us and he goes, "We will never speak of this." Oh man. So it's like, we knew better. You should always make sure things are off. You should turn off the breaker. The breaker was on the switchboard. That's why nobody went down there. And, and then you should always take your meters and test the equipment first. But that's a pretty good story. And that's what I call that, it doesn't look live story.